So, out of all the militaries in the entire world, the one we're looking at today ranks 55th. That's according to the 2026 Military Power Rankings. Just keep that number in the back of your mind as we get into this. Now, 55th might seem pretty modest, right? But consider this wild historical reality. Afghanistan has literally outlasted British, Soviet, and US NATO campaigns. That gives it a truly unique defensive reputation in modern military history. Which, naturally, raises a pretty incredible question. How exactly did a military ranked 55th globally manage to outlast three of history's greatest superpowers? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we are taking an objective, totally data-driven look at an unprecedented modern military evolution. We're going to chart the complex transformation of the armed forces of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, literally watching them go from a decentralized insurgency all the way to a formalized army. Here's our agenda for today, breaking this down purely by the data. We'll cover a unique military power, decades of constant conflict, the 2021 military restructuring, captured tech and arsenal, and finally, the strategy of resilience. All right, let's just jump right in. Section 1. A unique military power. According to calculations from the 2026 military balance by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, the active personnel of the current Islamic Emirate Army stands at an estimated 150,000 troops. Now, to put that 150,000 number into perspective for a second, imagine trying to build a Fortune 500 company's entire workforce completely from scratch, pulling it out of an underground insurgency all in just a few years. The sheer logistical, administrative, and organizational nightmare of officially managing that many people, it's absolutely staggering. Moving on to Section 2, Decades of Constant Conflict. Just look at the sheer whiplash of this timeline. It's like a pendulum swinging wildly. Back in 1979, they had an 85,000-strong state army fighting the Soviets. By 1992, that completely shattered into regional militias. Then you see the first Taliban army pop up in 1996, only to be dissolved entirely by 2001, and then re-emerge in 2021. It is a constant violent pendulum, swinging back and forth between superpower-backed standing armies and decentralized insurgencies. I mean, surviving that alone requires a bizarre level of institutional adaptability. Okay, now I want you to sit with this number for a second. $83 billion. Over 2 decades, that immense amount of U.S. investment was poured right into building up the Afghan National Army. But here's the deep historical irony. This specific investment, which was absolutely intended to defeat an insurgency, inadvertently funded one of the largest transfers of military hardware in modern history to that very same insurgency. That essentially set the stage for everything that followed. Which brings us to Section 3, the 2021 military restructuring. The stark, honestly surreal contrast between these two eras is just fascinating. Back in the 1990s, this force relied on a decaying fleet of 400 aging Soviet T-54, T-55, and T-62 tanks. They were operating largely as loose, disjointed patrimonial militias. Fast forward to their post-2021 reality, and that exact same faction is actively utilizing captured, totally modern U.S. military hardware, and they've rigidly restructured themselves into formalized, numbered regional corps. So to actually enforce this new bureaucracy, they divided their conventional land forces into 8 distinct corps. That stretches all the way from the 313 Central in Kabul down to the 217 Omari in Kunduz. But take a close look at that right-hand column. They didn't start from scratch here. They heavily mirrored the defeated Afghan National Army's regional layout. They essentially hijacked existing bases and geographic jurisdictions to fast-track their own formal structure across the whole country. And you know, this isn't just about conventional troops with rifles anymore. Far from it. Beyond the standard infantry, they've created these highly specialized units, like the Badri 313 Battalion, the Red Unit, and the Yarmouk 60 Special Forces. This really signals a deliberate evolution. It shows a tactical maturity, you know? A conscious move away from purely asymmetric guerrilla strikes toward dedicated, highly trained special forces capabilities meant for precise, targeted operations. All right, Section 4, Captured Tech and Arsenal. Following the fall of Kabul, a staggering 2,000 armored vehicles fell directly into their hands. We are talking about Humvees, M111 17 Guardians, and heavily armored Max Pro MRAPs. But actually, perhaps the most visually jarring shift is happening right at the infantry level. The iconic Russian AK-47, which for decades has literally been the universal historical symbol of the guerrilla fighter, is actively being phased out. It's being systematically replaced by US-made M4 carbines and modern night vision goggles. It's just a complete cultural and hardware transformation on the ground. Now, if you want a picture of pure historical juxtaposition, you've got to look at this Air Force inventory. It is an absolute geopolitical Frankenstein. You have Cold War-era Soviet-origin MiL-Mi-8 and Mi-24 helicopters parked on the exact same runway as American UH-60 Blackhawks, C-130 Hercules transports, and A-29 Super Tucano light attack aircraft. It's like an arsenal pulled from opposing sides of global conflicts spanning 50 whole years, all sitting right there under one banner. Check out the date here, January 11th, 2022. Now, the assumption globally was that this high-tech, sensitive gear would just rust away on the tarmac without Western contractors there to maintain it. But the clinical data shows otherwise. On this specific day, their own engineers successfully demonstrated and flew complex, formerly unserviceable, and abandoned US and ANA aircraft. So they aren't just passively stockpiling this equipment, they are actively adapting to the tech. Let's bring it home with Section 5, the strategy of resilience. Ultimately, according to those military power rankings we talked about earlier, their 55th global position isn't just about captured Blackhawks or some brand new bureaucracy. It's actually driven by a really unique trio of foundational strengths: mountain defense, a brutal asymmetric warfare legacy, and a deeply ingrained historical resilience. Let's zoom in on that mountain defense for a second. The geographic reality of those rugged mountains, valleys, and deserts acts as a massive strategic multiplier. It makes surveillance, logistics, and permanent control basically impossible for occupying armies. The terrain itself serves as a natural, unyielding fortress that historically just bleeds the logistics and manpower of any conventional foreign force trying to tame it. Which brings us to this incredible paradox we see in the data, the paradox of power. They now have to reconcile a legacy of decentralized, asymmetric attrition with the rigid, everyday demands of running a formalized, 150,000-strong standing army. Think about it. The very asymmetric, decentralized shadow tactics that allow them to survive and secure their country are the exact opposite of the centralized bureaucracy they are trying to build and maintain today. They are essentially trying to marry a legacy of shadow tactics with the rigid demands of a modern state military. And that leaves us with one of the most fascinating military questions of our time. Can a legacy of decentralized resistance successfully transform into a modern, centralized army? It is an unprecedented, extremely high-stakes military experiment playing out in real time right before our eyes. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Definitely keep an eye on this data, because how this paradox resolves is absolutely going to reshape our understanding of modern warfare.